Today, we're diving into the incredible story of how one single language, born on a pretty small island, managed to travel across a massive ocean and split into two distinct, powerful voices. It's really the story of England and America, of an empire and a republic, and of a shared language that, both unites and divides them.
So to really get a feel for the different paths these two nations took, you've got to understand the sheer difference in scale. And this, right here, just says it all. England's highest peak, Scafell Pike, stands at a respectable 3,200 feet. But look at America's highest, Denali, towering at over 20,000 feet. I mean, this isn't just about mountains, right? It's a perfect metaphor for the vast, wide-open continent that would completely reshape the English language itself.
Okay, so if we're going to understand the child, American English, we have to start with the parent. Let's rewind the clock a bit and take a look at how England and its language were forged in the first place. This is basically 1,000 years of English history in a whirlwind. It all kicks off with Germanic tribes, the Angles and the Saxons, who literally gave England its name and its core linguistic DNA. Then, bam, 1066, the Norman conquest hits, and it injects a massive dose of French into the language. We fast forward through some messy civil wars to the Tudors, who start centralizing the government and really standardizing English. And finally, in 1707, the Act of Union creates Great Britain, a new global power ready to export its language to the rest of the world. So, the language itself evolved in these three key stages. First, you have Old English. Think Beowulf. Honestly, it would sound completely alien to us today. Then comes Middle English, the language of Chaucer, and this is where you can really hear that French influence mixing in. And finally, we get to Modern English. This is the version that was locked in by the printing press and, of course, made famous by writers like Shakespeare. And this is the language that hopped on the boats to America.
All right, let's cross the Atlantic, because this is where that modern English begins a whole new journey, planting the seeds for what would eventually become a completely distinct American voice.
Now here's the crucial thing to get. The split wasn't just about geography. It was ideological, right from the very beginning. The early colonists weren't just looking for new land. They were trying to build a totally new society, an ideal community. This whole mindset, this desire to create something new and better, was basically baked into the American character, and naturally into its language.
And then, of course, comes the formal break. 1776 and the Declaration of Independence. That's not just the political date. You can think of it as the moment the linguistic divorce papers were filed. As soon as political independence was on the table, a powerful desire for cultural independence followed right behind. And just listen to this quote from Noah Webster, the dictionary guy. It just perfectly captures the attitude of the time. It shows that creating a unique American English wasn't some accident. No way. It was a conscious, patriotic act. They truly believed that a new country needed its very own way of speaking.
So, how exactly did the language start to change? Let's get into the nuts and bolts of this great divergence.
The changes actually happened surprisingly fast. Just a little over a century after Plymouth Rock, people back in England were already noticing a pretty big difference. And they were not impressed, calling the American way of speaking barbarous. This friction, this early criticism just goes to show that the two dialects were already on very, very different tracks.
And here's where it gets really fascinating, because in some ways, American English is actually more, conservative. Words like allow, guess, and reckon, when you mean to think, were super common in Shakespeare's time. They just fell out of use back in England. But because the colonies were so linguistically isolated, these older forms were perfectly preserved. They're like little linguistic fossils.
But Americans were also innovating like crazy. They ran into new animals, so they had to create new words, like groundhog. They repurposed old words, like using fork to describe a split in a road. They also borrowed words from their new neighbors and just embraced these super practical contractions like ain't and don't, a direct, no-nonsense way of speaking that the English found, absolutely atrocious.
This slide right here marks the moment it all became official, written down in black and white. In 1756, Samuel Johnson's big landmark English dictionary was the first to even acknowledge an American dialect. But the real game changer was Noah Webster's dictionary in 1828. Its whole purpose was to set a new standard, to codify a uniquely American language, separate and equal from its English parent.
So, with their languages now officially on separate paths, the two nations set off on very different journeys through the 19th and 20th centuries. Each one was busy forging its own unique, modern identity.
The contrast in their paths during the 19th century is just stark. Great Britain turned its focus outward, building this massive global empire that the sun never set on, and it absorbed words from all over the world. The United States, on the other hand, turned inward. It focused on industrializing, recovering from its own civil war, and pushing westward across a continent, a process that brought in new words from Spanish and Native American languages.
But even with all this divergence, it is so important to remember the shared foundation. I mean, look at this. The very first U.S. Census in 1790 shows that a staggering 90% of the population was of English descent. So the linguistic DNA of the new nation was, without a doubt, overwhelmingly English, even as its people started to build a uniquely American culture.
Fast forward to the modern era, and the whole dynamic has just completely flipped on its head. While British English was once the language of a global empire, American English has become the language of global culture. The U.S. now accounts for a massive 1/3 of the entire worldwide media and entertainment industry, exporting Americanisms back across the globe through movies, music, and TV.
Which, of course, brings us to our final question. For centuries, these two versions of English were on separate tracks, moving further apart. But in our modern hyper-connected world, are they starting to merge again? It's really something to think about the next time you hear a British teenager using American slang, or an American dropping a classic British phrase. The story of these two languages, well, it's still being written.